So to begin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up where I have AutoCAD. And I'm going to find it and open up the application. Now, what I'm going to be using is what we're going to be using in the lab, which is an educational version. Keep in mind that educational and what they sell commercially are not the same thing. And what you'll see is that when you first start to open up your AutoCAD educational product, it tells you that if you save the drawing, it will always be plotted with this following stamp. Okay? Now, for a commercial application, that's very problematic because essentially you don't want to hand a client, a drawing that says your, blueprints essentially are, created by an educational product. So if you plan on working for a firm while you're taking this class, do keep these separate. Okay? Do not take a firm's version, bring it into your educational version and save it and bring it back to the firm, because what happens is that once you do that, it infects basically the AutoCAD at the firm, and then it'll plot all of the plots with this stamp. Okay, so just make sure, and it's a big mess to try to figure out in the end, so just make sure that you do keep them separate, and that you're not working with the full-blown version in the educational version and vice versa. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue, and I'm going to open up my AutoCAD. Now, if it's the first time you're opening up this version of AutoCAD, you'll see that there will be a window that will tell you some of the new features of the new program. I have set mine not to show up on startup. So if you do get that window, you can close it out and you can continue on. So this is AutoCAD. Okay, so welcome to AutoCAD. Starting with release 2009, AutoCAD changed its interface dramatically. If you open earlier releases, you'll see that they don't look the same as this release or anything after 2009. This is because AutoCAD incorporated into its interface this ribbon system. And what they did for this ribbon system is they took tools of the same quote-unquote family and grouped them together, within these ribbon systems. Now you can click on the different headings to see what other tools are grouped into these types of features, okay, and these types of applications. But that's essentially what you'll see with this newish, interface. However, although, even though AutoCAD has changed the looks of it, you can still open up a version, of 2004, 2007, anything earlier than 2009, and it'll still work the same way. It'll still have this, pretty much the same commands. So it's not debilitating at all. It's not like they changed the whole program. So for this interface, what this consists of is the giant application button, which is the giant A in the upper left-hand corner, the quick access toolbar, okay, that has some of these tool buttons up here, the command ribbon, as we just talked about, the model space, okay, so this is your drafting space, your command window, okay, which is down below, and that's where your commands will show up when you type them, and your status bar, okay, which is right below that. The quick access menu contains basic commands such as save, open, plot, etc. And those are all up above here, whereas the giant A has those, but they also have a few more, and we'll talk about these as we go through the semester. The command ribbons contain the tool buttons for the commands. Okay, so these are all buttons that are commands for performing a task in AutoCAD. To access different groups of commands, we can switch our workspace setting, okay, up above here, which has this cog, and essentially what that does is it changes the tools that are up here. Okay, so if I expand this, you'll see that there are, 3D Basics, 3D Modeling, and AutoCAD Classic. Okay, what that does is it doesn't change anything in the model space. Okay, it only changes the tools that show up here. Okay, so for right now, let's just leave this as drafting and annotation, and we'll work with that for now. Okay, we will start to work with the 3D ones later on in the semester, where we might change our workspace settings, but we don't have to worry about that just yet. So for example, these are the tools that we have for 2D drafting and annotation. When we click on 2D drafting and annotations, our ribbons have two sets of menus. Okay, one menu lists the larger categories, home, insert, annotate, so on and so forth. And And then each menu has its own subset of tools, okay, containing, the draw tools, the modify tools, the tools for layers, so on and so forth. Some tools are displayed, okay, right out, and but that doesn't mean that there's not more to it. So, for example, you'll see the line and the polyline, and you'll see the circle, and the circle has that little black arrow pointing down. If I click on that, that'll show that there's more options to those tools below, okay, and you'll see that if I kept my mouse over this tool, it will, after a while, show you, basically what that tool is about, how to use it, and give you a little tutorial on that. If I expand these tool families, okay, you'll see that in the corner here, okay, in the lower left-hand corner of that, there's this little pin. And so what happens is if I move my mouse away, it'll bounce back up. But if I expand it and I click the pin there, okay, you'll see that the icon kind of shows that the pin is pinning it to the model space beyond, okay, and keep it open. So you can keep that group of tools open like that, or if you don't want it to, then you just click on that pin again, it'll unpin it, and it'll bounce back up. In drafting, a lot of times you need as much space as possible, screen space as possible. So because of this, you can hide these ribbon tools as much as possible. And to do that, if you go to the end of the list, okay, and click on the minimize to panel buttons, if you keep clicking on it, they're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, if you find that you come up with a screen that looks like this and you want to get those ribbons back, all you have to do is click on that button again, and it's going to expand them. Okay. With this system, you basically have to memorize, where the tools are in order to use them. But, as we go through it, it's probably not going to be an issue for you. In the center of the screen is the model space, okay? And the model space, you'll see, goes from, when I move my cursor up above, you can see it goes from an arrow. In model space, the cursor looks like a crosshairs, okay? To the bottom of the screen are a set of tabs, okay, basically giving you access to paper space and model space. Just make sure that you're always in model space, okay? And again, as I said earlier, we're going to go over paper space later on. Okay. Below the model space, okay, is your command window. And this window gives you feedback on which commands you are using and what input is required next. So it's AutoCAD's way of talking back to you and telling you what it needs. It's helpful. I always say that the command line is really, really helpful to have up, especially when you start to work with AutoCAD, because it's good to frequently check just to make sure, if you're not sure how a command works, it'll tell you what to do next. So basically, AutoCAD is asking you, what it needs from you, and it'll tell you if there's an error. At the bottom of the program window, you'll see essentially the status bar with all these buttons. Okay, we'll get into that a little bit later. And then this coordinate readout, okay, and the icon in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen are only visible hints to the coordinate system that's embedded in the program. And the L-shape coordinate, the X and the Y, is referred to as a user coordinate and indicates the orientation of the drawing. So that'll become helpful once we start to work with more complex drawings and 3D modeling. But for now, it's just a simple X and Y coordinate. To the right of the coordinates, okay, are drafting settings. Okay, so we'll, look into these. They have snap mode, grid display, ortho mode, polar tracking, so on and so forth. We'll be covering some of them, but not all of them. So, kind of get used to working with them, accessing them, see what they do. Because a lot of this is really personal, okay? The way that you set up how you use AutoCAD is very personal. It's not right or wrong. It's just how you feel most comfortable using the program. So you'll find that you might use some of these where your friends might not, okay? If that option is on, okay, then the button is blue. If it's not, it's gray, okay? So you'll see that some of them are blue, and that just means that those options are on. By default, okay, AutoCAD displays what's called a view cube in the upper right-hand corner. I think for beginning, or for a beginner, they're especially, confusing. So for now, don't, try to keep this on its own as much as possible. You can get rid of it in the options, but for right now, just don't click on it or don't mess with it, because you'll see how it works later on when we actually get into 3D AutoCAD, which uses the exact same model space, so that's why we have that.